Hey everyone, it's EJ from iDesign.com. I am back with a brand new Cinema 4D tutorial, and I'm really excited about this one. It is on how to create cell animation style paint strokes using Cinema 4D. No third-party plugins at all. You don't need X particles. My technique just uses all the built-in stuff inside of Cinema 4D to create this kind of look. And this is like a very common thing you see these days, this cell animation style illustration kind of stuff in 2D animations, and really cool effect. But my technique is pretty flexible. You can kind of get your paint strokes to look the way you like them, whether it's a little bit more grunged up or a little bit more smooth, or however you like it. It's a really fun effect. I've been having a lot of fun with it. But you can see on my Tumblr page right now that I have created a few paint strokes that actually resolve my logo on. And then I actually played around with how to get this to kind of write cursive type on. So this is a very flexible technique. You can use it a lot of different ways, different techniques of writing on different things. And I'll be going over a few of them in my tutorial. So let's just jump right in, and I will show you how to create cell animation style paint strokes in Cinema 4D. Alright, so what I need is first an object that is actually going to motivate the brushstroke, and that is going to be this sphere. I just have this simple animated sphere that kind of just animates in a circular kind of fashion, and what we're going to do is use this to kind of motivate our paint stroke. So to do this, we're going to need to trace the path and have the path kind of generate the stroke. So to trace this object and create a spline wherever this path goes, we're going to go to the aptly named tracer object, and if you have the object already selected, it's automatically going to put that in the trace link in your tracer. So I'm going to bring the tracer object down, and if I hit play, you can see that we have a whole mess of splines, and that is because we have this trace vertices on. If I check that off, it's only going to create one spline and trace that one object with that one spline, and that's what we want. So right now our spline is kind of chunky, so what we want to do is change the type from linear to b-spline, and then intermediate points we're going to switch to adaptive, and let's just bring this down to 10. That'll kind of help smooth out our spline here. So now, actually we can bring this down to, let's just bring it all the way down. Now that's really smooth. So now what we want to do is, you can see that in my little animation, the strokes kind of come on and then they leave. So right now our stroke here just kind of is on, animates on, and stays on, and we don't want that. So to change that, to kind of have this like tail kind of follow it and then kind of collapse into itself, we're going to go and change the limit from none to from end. And right now it's set to 1, and you don't see anything, but if I increase this value, you'll see that this kind of creates a tail. And that's exactly what we want. We want the stroke to end, or we want the stroke to write on, and then the tail kind of like tucks into itself. So for this, I'm just going to keep this to about 13. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create two tracers, one that's going to handle a big thick stroke and one that's going to kind of handle the small little blobs. So I'm going to rename this tracer the long streak, and then I'm going to just duplicate this, and this will be the short streaks. And then for the short streaks, I'm just going to make the streaks a little bit shorter. And what I'm going to do is actually have some geometry created through these little streaks here. I'm just going to worry about the long streak first, but to do this, what I'm going to do is first just create, I'm just going to group these objects. So I got both of my tracers underneath a null, and I'm just going to rename this null streaks. And then what we're going to do is, so this streak is tracing the sphere. This one I don't want to worry about yet. I'm just going to remove that and turn it off. So we need some actual geometry to create our streaks from this traced path. And to do that, we're going to go up to Metaball. And what we're going to do is we're going to throw our metal ball underneath our null and then throw both of these tracer objects underneath here. And you can see that that creates a path. Or that creates this kind of like metaball-y, blobby kind of stroke that if we put this pink little texture on it, we have a stroke. We have this little 3D stroke kind of like After Effects. It's not too exciting yet. But what we're going to do is we're going to change all these values here. And to kind of get what I feel like is a good paint kind of strokey kind of look is to bring up the hull value pretty high to say about, let's do about 750, and then we're going to bring up the editor subdivisions here to about 50. So 50 and 50, and then I'm going to turn on exponential fall off. And you can see right away that instead of this big stroke, we have this kind of little streak going on. And that's not too substantial yet. So what we're going to actually do is create more of these objects that are going to get traced. So we're not going to trace just the emitter, we're also going to trace some other objects that will then combine with the metal ball to make the metal ball a little bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is create a cloner object, and I'll name this small blobs. And what I'm going to do is just clone some spheres. So just get a sphere, plop it in there. We'll just bring the radius pretty low. Don't need many segments. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and just clone onto an object, and that object will be this original sphere here. So let's see. If we have... So right now it's set to vertex. We don't want that. We actually just want surface. And then we can actually choose how many spheres we want. Let me actually bring this up so you guys can see. So there's my spheres right there. And for this, I'll probably only need a count of about like 9. So now what I'm going to do is actually trace this cloner object with this short streak. So I'm going to drag the cloner object in here, and I'll turn the short streak on. So this is tracing all of those clones. So we are tracing 9 of these small spheres. So now I'm just going to hide this for now. So with that extra tracer, you can see that with the tracer tracing both the pink emitter and the short streak, or all these little clones, you can see that we're getting kind of like a more kind of paint stroke kind of look, but we're not quite there yet. So what I actually want to do is do the same exact thing. I don't want to just trace this emitter with this long streak. What I'm going to do is remove that. I'm going to duplicate the small blobs and name this big blobs. And I just want, say, about 5 of these. And then what I'm going to do with the long streak is actually trace this big blob cloner. So it's tracing 5 of these objects, 5 of these spheres. So now when I paint, we're seeing that we have this nice thicker kind of stroke. If I run to, you see we're getting closer. Still not yet. It doesn't look too organic yet. And now what we're gonna do to kind of add that organicness, or that kind of splattery kind of movement or feel to it, is we're going to go in with both of my cloners selected here. I'm going to go up to MoGraph, and I'm just going to create a random effector. And I'm going to change these values to about 150 each. Make sure that it has been applied to each of my objects here. And then what we're going to do is use this random effector to kind of really spastically move these clones around, so as they're being traced, it's not so linear. So what, instead of just a linear path, it's going to be like, whoa, going out of control, being traced, and then those kind of deformed, random, kind of spastic paths will then be metaballed into form more of a organic kind of paintbrush stroke kind of look. So let's go back into our random effector, and we're going to go and change our mode from random to turbulence. And then what I'm going to do is change the animation speed to 200 to get this really frenetic kind of movement. And let's just change the scale to 0. So what's going to happen is, let's turn our spheres back on. So what's going to happen is you can see that our spheres are really going out of control. If I turn my metal ball off, so you can just see, so you're seeing that we have this kind of really frenetic kind of animated stroke kind of going on. So all of our splines are really kind of frenetic looking. I think, yeah, we need global, and scale's good. And you can kind of mess around with how this looks, and you can even mess around with in what direction these go. So now if I turn on the meta ball, you can see that this is probably a little bit too much. Let's bring this down to 150. You can see that we're now getting kind of this more organic kind of look here. We're kind of looking kind of brush strokey so far. Now let's go back. Let me actually go back and show you why I changed these meta ball values to the way that I did. You can see that if we have a low hole value, that we have this kind of thick stroke, and with the larger hole value, you can see we're getting more of these splatters. So this is very important because this technique is very flexible in how you actually have these paint strokes looking. So you can have them more roughed up, you can have them more smooth, and it's all driven by under, you know, at the base of it, controlled by all of these metaball object values. So you can change the subdivision editor to something higher, and it's more chunky. Or if you bring this a little bit lower to say 45, you can see that you're getting more of your streaks in here, but it's a little bit more uniform and not too organic anymore. So you can kind of mess around with this, see what you like. So that is the random effector, kind of moving all of our clones around that are being traced and creating more of an organic kind of look to our brush stroke here. So now what I want to do, let's go back to frame 1, and I'll hit play. And what I want to do now is add even more organic kind of random more random turbulence to this to make our brushstroke look a little bit more grungy. Grungy is the word. So let's go ahead and in our streaks little layer, what we're going to do is go and create a displacer object. And I'm just going to drag this underneath the null so it's affecting the meta ball without having to put this displacer object underneath the stack or anything. So if it's on the same level in the hierarchy, it'll actually affect all the objects in that same hierarchy. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and create some noise, and I'm going to go to our height and really crank this up. And you can see that this is creating, it's definitely grunging it up, but it's a little bit too much. And what I'm going to do is go to like a negative value. Let's say about -40. And then what I'm going to do is change the type from intensity centered to just intensity. And look what just happened. You can see that now we're getting really chunky kind of looks, and it's looking a lot more organic. It's still chunky, but you can see that just bringing in the height with this turbulence kind of helps a lot. And what we're going to do is go to this noise, and we're just going to change these values a little bit. So I'm going to change the global scale to about 800. And let's bring up the animation speed to about 4. So then we have this noise kind of animating and getting this kind of nice organic undulation or movement here. So you can see that that displacer kind of goes a long way in helping with this kind of organic paint stroke splatter kind of look. So you can see though that it's kind of still chunky right now. And that's because we have this high hull value, but we need that high hull value to get all these kind of like little dot blobs here. Because with a lower value, that'll just connect all of these with the metal ball. So to be able to smooth all of this out, what we're going to do is go ahead and I am going to let's group these again. Group, and this will be metal ball group. And what I'm going to do is throw this null into a, wait for it, cloth surface. So what the cloth surface is going to do, if I place this null group underneath the cloth surface, I can actually change the subdivision and smooth all this out. So you can see the lines. If I zoom in here, you can see that it was kind of chunky before, but if I bring up some subdivisions, it's going to kind of smooth everything out. And the nice thing about the cloth surface is not only that you can kind of smooth out the geometry by adding more to subdivisions, you can actually increase the thickness. Now look at how thick we can make our blobs if we want. So I'm going to set the thickness to about 8, so I'm liking that. And you can now see that that kind of smooths everything out, and we're getting this kind of really nice splattering move kind of look with just our cloth surface here. And you can kind of mess around with the subdivisions. You can mess around with the thickness, whatever kind of thickness you think looks good. So this is very flexible with what kind of look you're going for. Let's go back to regular shading here. So now we have this more fluid, kind of painterly, kind of blobby look here with our brush stroke. And with our displacer here, again, you can see how much just that negative noise value here really helps to create all these little splatters and everything here. So one final thing that you can do to smooth this out even more is by going and getting a smoothing deformer and placing that in the same group. And you can see already that this looks really smoothed out right now. It's probably a little bit too smooth, but automatically it has the stiffness set pretty low. What I like to do is kind of just give it a little bit of smoothing and maybe bring down the iterations a little bit so it's not so much. It's just a subtle kind of smoothing, and you can have this kind of controlled to your taste, so you get more smooth little blotches right here, paint splotches. And the nice thing about everything going on here is you can change the seed of the noise here to however you want. Let's actually get to a point where we can see what happens here. Stop. There we go. So you can actually change this, and you can also change the seed of the actual cloned spheres here that are creating the traced splines that are creating this whole paint stroke effect. And again, you can control the count. You can control the streaks here. So again, going back to why I created the long and short streak is without the short streaks, you see we just have this kind of light splatter. And if we just have the short streaks, we kind of have these splatters here. But combining both, we get a little bit more fuller control, and it adds that extra bit of randomness to this stroke that I think really helps out a lot. And you can again change the length of each of the splines in this group. So again, this has so much control over getting the kind of paint looks that you like. Now when it actually comes to and even more control is, again, remember that we're actually the sphere is driving everything, even the size of the sphere. So say if we want a thin stroke, maybe more calligraphy or something like that, or a big fat stroke, we can kind of change the size of our sphere, and you can see our clones kind of move along with it. So if I just increase the size of the sphere, you can see that that really changes the look completely of our brush stroke. And I think this looks really, really cool just by increasing that size value in the Y on our sphere. Because again, everything's controlled by this sphere initially because we have these clones, these spheres cloned onto our actual surface of our sphere. So they follow every deformation you have on that sphere. So now look at that. I mean, that looks pretty badass. That looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. So that's kind of how I got this look. Now let's actually go to animating this guy. So let's hide our sphere and hide these guys too. So remember to hide these spheres so they don't show up in the render. So what you're going to do to actually animate these guys on, let's go into our timeline. So right now, if I don't have, let's say I have my, so I have my objects kind of come on right around frame 5 or so, right? So let's hit play and they animate on perfectly. But what happens when you actually want to animate this off? Let's actually play this out and see what happens. So we got the sphere going around, we got the strokes happening, and we're getting almost to the end. So again, if you think these blobs are too far back, you can just bring in that long stroke a little bit to have control over that. So it's swirling around almost to the end. Now say if you want to actually animate this guy off, all you'd have to do is actually, let's increase this to about 80. And let's actually see what happens here. So you see that after, this is what I was trying to show, is after you get the movement done, you still have the metaball blobs just kind of sitting here, just kind of farting around. And you don't want that to just kind of stay there. So what you want to do is at the end of your streak, so say, let's see, think about, oh man, I got play it from the beginning again. So to actually animate it off, you can see that you have everything animated. And sometimes you'll get this too. And what you want to do is, I'm going to hit escape and then go to the beginning. And sometimes you got to click the go to frame 0 button a few times to get all the tracers and stuff reset. Hit play again. Whoop, guess it didn't do it enough. Get back there. Okay, hit play. There we go. And so we're going to go through this again. So what we're going to do is at the end of this animation, we're going to kind of let it play through and see at what point that the streak ends and we're just left with these little floating blobs. And what we're going to do is simply just go to our meta ball and just keyframe the enable and disable little option. So let's see. It's coming around. So how you guys doing out there? Doing good? It's nice to hear. All right. Now we're coming around. Wait for it. And now we're stuck with our blob. So right around like frame 55 or so is where we probably want these guys to animate off. And again, what I said is what all we're going to do is go to our meta ball, go to enabled, hit a keyframe, go to enable and uncheck it, and you'll see that that actually just turns our meta ball right off. So what you can actually do is also kind of keyframe the size or the radius of our sphere and bring that down too. So it's a single blob and then nothing. So let's go again. And man, my computer needs a little bit more power here, huh? Got these really nice streaks. You can see on my timeline that is about where, yeah, this is where my meta ball kind of goes off, turns off from enabled to disabled. This is like watching paint dry. But we're almost to the end. And our stroke is coming right back around. Here's the tail. That's from the from end option. So you can see that right at the end, it kind of, our meta ball turns off, and you can adjust like when that actually happens. Say you want it a little bit sooner, but what you don't want is it happening too early so that your whole entire streak kind of just disappears all at once. So you don't want that. So you can kind of play around with the animation and see what you like best. So again, if you think that that long streak is a little bit too long, just bring it in. You can play with the count. So if you want a thicker, more substantial stroke, you can bring in more of these objects that'll be traced, and you'll get this really big, thick paint stroke like so. And there's a lot of applications to this. So here's a few examples of, let's see. So here's me actually just, I have that initial sphere. So that was that starting sphere, and all I have it doing is going along this spline path of my, let's see, of my iDesign letter, little cursive letter here. So I just have those splatters kind of following along, or that sphere following along with the sweep start growth, and it kind of just follows along. And the key to this is having this intermediate points set to uniform. If you have it to adaptive, it's not going to follow along very well. So you can see that my stroke, or my sweep here, if I move this up, well, where's my sweep? Let's turn off the meta ball. You can see that my meta ball is already to here, but my sweep is already here, or is only here. So that is due to uniform, and I actually have a tutorial going over this. It's I forget what the name of it is, but it's with paths, with it's creating streaks with Cinema 4D. So look that up. I'll pull that up at the end of this tutorial. But that is just kind of using this blobby paint stroke to draw on cursive text or something like that. So that's one cool use. And another is I have been learning Japanese lately, and I figured this is a good application for it. So you have this kind of like writing on a Japanese character with this kind of paint stroke here. And the key to this is, so what we had before was the limit was from end. And what we're going to do is just change this from start. So we don't want that tail end to kind of like taper and go back into itself. We want that stroke to come on and stay on. And that's just easily done by choosing these from start. And what the amount is just the amount of frames that it'll stay on for, or the amount of frames that it'll actually draw on. So I have my long streak a little bit longer and my short streak just a tiny bit lower. So what's going to happen is at 41 frames, this is going to stop tracing and kind of end the spline right about here. And then my long streak is going to keep going for 45 frames until it stops too. So we have it starting from frame 0, drawing on, and then you'll see it around 40 frames, our short streak will end, and then our long streak will go on for about 5 more frames and then stop. So that's how we can actually animate on and keep on a brush stroke instead of having it like I created before, where we have it animate on and then animate off. So that's by just changing this limit here from the start and then from the end. So we're getting to frame 40, and our short streaks will kind of go away and just stop. So right about there. So those are short streaks will end, and then just our long streak will continue. So you can see right here that we have just a little tapering right there. And there we go. And that creates our little streak. So let's hit render. And then we got this kind of cool little streak. And again, you can change the amount of how long those traced splines go for. And then I just added a cell shader with just back facing with the camera lighting it. and just a very subtle shading difference from gray to darker gray. And that just kind of helps give it a little bit of depth depending on where you place this. And again, if you don't know about the cell shader, be sure to check out my tutorial on that as well. I'll link to that in this post. Or if you just want flat black, you can just not even have a shader at all. You can just have a flat material in your luminance and just have a flat 2D looking stroke. So then, whoa, that's kind of cool. I don't know what happened there. So to kind of finish is, I'm sure you guys, if you haven't seen at the start of the tutorial, I showed my little example where I have a bunch of strokes kind of animating on my little iDesign logo here. And all that is just timing out a bunch of different of those little setups that I just showed you in this tutorial, where I have one that's blue, actually a couple that's blue, a white one. I have all these different groups of all of these spheres writing on and creating all these brush strokes. And then I have all of these cell shaded materials creating this nice shading on it too, so it's not completely flat. But again, if you want just completely flat colors, just use flat luminance colors. So and again, this has so much control over everything. You can change how much random speed, the position, how much position change you want. You can really have a lot of fun with stylizing how you get your strokes looking in your scene. So that is it for me. Hopefully you guys can make some really cool cell animations type paint splatters and stuff. I want to see what you make, so if you make anything with it, be sure to at me on Twitter. Let me know what you're making, and hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot, guys.